Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our sixth Nourish to Flourish webinar. If this is your first time joining us, we're so glad to have you. And if you're a regular attendee, welcome back. My name is Marianne Seabaugh, and I'm one of the clinical dietitians with the Stanford Lifestyle and Weight Management Clinic. I'll be your moderator for today's session. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Stanford Health Library YouTube channel along with the PowerPoint slides. You'll also receive an email after the session with a link to the recording. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to add them to the Q&A chat box located at the bottom of your screen. We'll review those during our Q&A portion at the end. Now I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, Gina Ringelstein, who is today's presenter. Gina Ringelstein is a registered dietitian nutritionist and board-certified specialist in obesity and weight management. For the past 5 years, Gina has been an integral part of the Stanford healthcare family, serving as a clinical dietitian at the Stanford Lifestyle and Weight Management Center. Gina is passionate about providing individualized nutrition counseling and practical strategies to support sustainable and impactful lifestyle changes. Her holistic approach helps individuals balance the demands of their personal and professional lives while also preparing for and managing bariatric surgery or building long-term healthy habits. Today, Gina will be talking about the incredible wellness benefits of regular physical activity, and will be sharing tips for incorporating movement into your daily routine. So with that, Gina, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marianne, for that introduction. And thank you for having me today. I am super excited to be talking about one of my favorite topics in the wellness and health space, which is movement. And today we're going to be talking about all the different ways that we're going to energize our bodies and our minds through movement. Now, movement is often a very important piece of the mental health, weight loss, and lifestyle equation. However, it can be really challenging to incorporate movement into our days for a variety of reasons. And so I hope you walk away with today some ideas and strategies of ways to start incorporating movement into your days and ways that are making it more fun, enjoyable, and maybe this even sheds a new light on ways to think about movement. And so we're going to head into all of that good stuff in just a moment. As we kick things off, I think it's really important to reflect on movement and thinking about ways or, options or things that kind of tend to get in the way of moving our bodies. And so I would like you to do this poll. So go ahead, pull out your smartphones, go ahead and scan the QR code you see here. If you don't have your phone handy, you can also type in our link here into your web browser and go ahead and answer this question of what tends to get in the way of moving your body. And I have some suggestions here on the screen that might resonate with you. So maybe it's often noticing that you feel too busy, there's not enough time in the day, maybe you're feeling a little bit tired or low energy levels. Maybe it's often that thought of, I don't know what to do or where to even start, or maybe that dreaded feeling of, I just don't feel motivated, I don't want to. Maybe it's also environment, physical limitations, or maybe several of these resonate with you. So I'll take a couple more seconds. Go ahead and again, scan that QR code with your phone. Go ahead and take the link you see here, type that into your web browser, and answer what feels most pertinent for you at this point in time. I'll give us a few more seconds before we get to all of our answers. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, and let's see what our results are as far as what tends to get in the way of moving all of our bodies here today. Okay, so lots of different answers here. 33% coming in with I'm too busy, not enough time. Also going down here a little bit more, and of course 27%, many of us are feeling that many of these reasons or barriers and challenges to movement pop up, maybe that motivation factor, environment, etc. Well, don't you worry, we're going to go over all of these most common barriers when it comes to movement, and again go over some strategies or ways to start thinking about movement that make these barriers or reasons for not engaging in movement a little bit easier to tackle. And before we get to all of that, I often find that before we jump into that, it's really important to think about why we want to move, what benefits come from movement. And oftentimes this can be different for every single person, and movement can mean a lot of different things for everyone. But I like to think about these top three categories, and connecting to your why when we think about why we want to move is something I want you to think about and reflect on a little bit later as we spend the next several minutes together. And so when we think about these three top pillars for why we might want to move, so the first thing is energy and mental health. So we know when we're engaging in movement, this is going to boost our endorphins. It often releases those feel-good hormones. And when those hormones are released, we end up being a little bit more relaxed, our anxiety and stress decreases, and we're feeling a little bit more motivated. That also can often boost our mood. Even with just 5, 10, 15 minutes of movement, we often have a new perspective. Our stress levels have decreased. We're thinking about things a little bit clearer, and that can even enhance our focus, which is incredibly important as many of us are working during the day, caring for our families, etc. Movement is also going to support improving sleep, and sleeping is really an important part of the health equation. Oftentimes when we're engaging in more consistent exercise, it's going to support deeper and higher quality sleep, which increases our energy levels and helps us tackle the next day and then on. So that's one of the most important pillars when we think about why we should move. Secondly is blood sugar balance. So we know that by moving, that's going to be really helpful for minimizing those blood sugar spikes. So for example, if you think about going for a walk right after a meal, all of that food we just consumed for energy, oftentimes that causes our blood sugars to spike, especially if you have your carbohydrates present. But if you're going for a walk, we're actually going to use that energy that we just consumed at that meal to power our walk. And that's going to be really great for minimizing those blood sugar spikes. And in turn, the more consistent we exercise, the more sensitive our bodies become to insulin, that great and important hormone that's secreted from our pancreas to help regulate our blood sugars. And that's important for many of us when we think about maybe our family histories of pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, metabolic disease, etc. Now, the third piece of the why we should be moving, or the benefits of movement, the third pillar here is one of my favorite pieces: body recomposition and longevity. When we think about the most important organ in our body, that's often muscle, but we probably don't think about muscle in that way, right? So when we're engaging in more routine movement, we're not only building and maintaining that lean muscle, but that muscle we have in our body is going to support our metabolism and our functional movement lifelong. That also brings us to bone density. So when we're engaging in weight-bearing activities such as squats or lunges, that's not only strengthening our muscles, but our bones. So that's going to help reduce risk of osteoporosis, fractures, etc. So many different reasons that movement can be beneficial. And I often encourage you to think about what is most important to you. Why do you want to move? And again, we're going to come back to that here. Now, not only do we want to think about the benefits of movement, but the one question I often get asked the most is what counts? What counts towards that exercise bucket when we're thinking about movement? And I like to think about movement as anything that makes you feel great, that is something you look forward to, and that's going to be different for every single person. So again, we're looking at another three pillars or buckets, so to speak, for different types of movement. And that first one is NEAT. And maybe some of you have heard of this, maybe some of you have not, but this refers to the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Basically, what that is referring to is any of the movement that happens in the in-between parts of your days. So rather than that structured exercise class or going for a bike ride, this really refers to the walking or cleaning you're doing in your household, maybe the cooking and standing at the stove, standing up at your desk, walking farther in the parking lot, maybe fidgeting when you're sitting at your desk, or you're waiting for your child's swim practice to be over. All of that type of exercise actually is much more significant than we would probably think. So being more active and engaging in small pieces of this type of movement can really go a long way, and often falls into the category of things that don't feel like exercise, as you can see in these fun images on the screen. Now, additionally to the movement bucket, we also have structured movement. So maybe what we think more about often when we think about moving our bodies or quote unquote exercise: going for a run, a jog, attending a fitness class, going to the gym and working out, or maybe even engaging in some strength training. This also goes into that movement bucket, which is also very important. The third bucket we see here is that mind-body movement. So things that maybe are more fluid, maybe more musicality-wise is something we're engaging in. So yoga, stretching, maybe Pilates, dance, Tai Chi. And so again, we're thinking about all these different types of movement that count towards that exercise goal. And so I hope as you're starting to see these different buckets of where exercise can come from, maybe this is shedding some light on things that you do and you don't even realize. Maybe this is also highlighting some opportunities to move a little bit more. Maybe this is thinking about increasing your NEAT activity by parking farther, by taking the stairs rather than the elevator. Maybe this also means walking to pick up your child from school rather than driving if you're able to. So lots of ways for us to start thinking about this in a different way. Now, when we think about movement, of course, we have this idea of what counts, but it's also good to know how much we should be moving, right? And so the World Health Organization recommends that we engage in at least 150 minutes of aerobic activity. So when we think of aerobic activity, we think of movement that's going to get that heart rate elevated. My mind instantly goes back to the jazzercise, Jane Fonda days when you see them doing all of the movements on top of a step or a box. So that's really getting your heart rate up. And this could include, of course, traditional jazzercise per se, but this could be bike riding, swimming, walking your dog, playing sports, playing tag with your family, gardening, etc. So anything that's really getting that heart rate up. Now, that's a really important piece of the puzzle when we think about cardiovascular health. But again, we really want to incorporate that body composition, that longevity piece by working on building and maintaining our lean muscle mass. And that's where muscle strengthening activity comes in. And our goal on a weekly basis is to engage in this at least 2 times a week. So we have these 2 areas of our aerobic activity with 150 minutes a week and strength training 2 times a week. Now, strength training can look different again for every single person. This might be body weight when you think about doing air squats, push-ups. Maybe this will be walking lunges. This also could incorporate dumbbells, which free weights, weighted machines, etc. Now, you might be thinking about this and thinking, Gina, this is a lot. How am I going to fit in 150 minutes of cardiovascular activity and strength training 2 times a week? I'm working full time, I'm juggling a family, I have other things I need to attend to. Where do I go from here? And this is where I like to say, this is just a guide. This is something to work up to. It's really important to think about what the end goal is, but maybe you create other smaller goals in between before you get to this ultimate goal of 150 minutes of cardiovascular activity and strength training 2 times a week. Now, just to give you a bit of a visual as far as what this would look like, here is what this ideal exercise goal would be. So you have your cardiovascular exercise, that 150 minutes. We break that up into 5 episodes of 30 minutes of walking, your 5 times a week to give you the 150. So you can see we do that here on our several days out of the week. And then we also incorporate that strength training. So you see that we've incorporated that on Wednesday and Saturday, and this is going to support that overall goal. But again, maybe this is not something that feels comfortable to you. Maybe you don't feel like you can allocate time to incorporate all of this, just as many of us suggested earlier in that poll, right? I don't have time. I don't know where to fit it in. I don't have energy. Maybe, again, it's all of the above. And so how do we work towards this goal? And this is where I really like to start when we're thinking about creating exercise routines and habits and goals to really support our bodies, of course, but even more our minds and that mental health. And so the biggest question, how do we get started? Often the most challenging question, and the first thing I often say when I'm working with someone individually is saying, don't wait to feel ready. Oftentimes, it's not going to happen. We don't just magically wake up one day and we decide, I'm motivated, I want to start exercising. Sure, there might be the 1 small % of those of us who do, but most of the time, action follows, or I should say motivation follows action. So if we go back to Nike's original statement of just do it, this is what I want you to take away from that. Just get started. Oftentimes when you get started, that's going to help build your momentum, that motivation, and that consistency, more importantly, builds confidence. That's showing you that you're able to show up for yourself in many different ways, but that consistency is really important. And we'll talk more about how to do that. Now, when you think about just getting started, I want you to think about the next question is, what do you enjoy? And not just types of movements you enjoy, for example, bike riding or dancing or going to an exercise class, but what do you enjoy even on your 1% days? And what I mean by that is on the days where you have 1% energy to give. You woke up late, there was traffic getting to work, it was a hectic day, and by the time you get home, the last thing you want to do is exercise. But you think of that 1% energy level activity that you look forward to. And maybe for you, that's taking a stroll around the block with your family. Maybe that's taking your dog for a walk. Maybe that's calling up a friend and seeing if she wants to meet for a walk around the block and a cup of tea. So really focusing in on the activities that you enjoy, and that's what you'll choose to help you get started with creating that momentum for getting started with movement. Now, you also see on here that we want to build a SMART goal. And maybe some of you have heard about SMART goals before, but when we think about maybe this goal of walking, and we really enjoy that after a long day, that would be our 1% energy task. When we think about walking, if we tell ourselves, I'm going to walk, that doesn't really tell you how to do it, where to do it, when to do it. So we want to be as strategic as possible with our goal setting. And that's where we create SMART goals. And as you can see on one of our images here, that's where you're making your goal specific, you're making it measurable, attainable, relevant, or touchable, or timely is another version of that, but really focusing in on what feels most realistic for you today. So as you get started tomorrow, you know that there's no way you won't commit to that. So as an example, rather than saying, I'm going to start walking, this is where I want you to say, I'm going to start walking 2 times a week after dinner for 5 minutes. And that's your short goal. And you also want to include in that goal, when you're thinking about the what, the where, and the when, but also the why. Why do I want to start walking 2 times a week? It's going to relieve my stress. It helps get me outside in fresh air, which I don't get of much during the day. And it's also going to help manage my weight, my blood sugar goals, etc. So really connecting to that and making the goal so easy you almost can't not do it. That's the place you want to start. And that's how you create that momentum, and the just do it theme really pulls through. In addition to that, other strategies when you think about getting started is to schedule it. So just as you might treat an appointment, a meeting, your child's basketball practice, whatever that looks like as far as putting things into your calendar, I often think, why don't we do that for ourselves? Why don't we schedule our own appointment to take care of ourselves, body and mind? And that often can be accomplished through movement. So add that to your calendar, put it on your family Google Doc, put it on your Palm Pilot, whatever you have readily available, but make it scheduled, because when you schedule it, then it's real. It's instead of being something that you're just thinking about. Additionally, I often recommend habit stacking with a current routine. So for example, if you are typically someone who is waking in the morning and you'd really like to get your exercise done first thing, maybe something we can stack that on top of is coffee. Many of us often get up first thing in the morning and we head straight to that kitchen, making a beeline to make our first cup of coffee. And so the sentiment here would be, rather than getting up and drinking our coffee and then exercising, we want to stack our new habit of going for that 5 to 10 minute walk on top of a habit we already do. So maybe that's where you plan for those 2 times a week. You're going to, on Tuesday and Thursday, before that first cup of coffee, you're going to go for your walk, and then you can enjoy your coffee. So it's almost kind of using that strategy to say, I'm going to do the thing that I'm really trying hard to incorporate into my day-to-day before I do the thing I always do. And these are definitely some thoughts as far as how you get started. And lastly, consulting with a professional. There's so many great personal trainers and resources out there, especially depending on gyms or fitness classes, where at whatever space you feel most comfortable in, those can be really great people to consult with, as well as physical therapists. So maybe for you, there's more physical limitations that come into play, and that would be great for you to consult with someone who can understand limitations, maybe challenges, and things that you can do and maybe should avoid as you're getting started. Now, as we're getting started, there's all this oftentimes buzz or static I like to think about when you think about getting started with exercise. And what about X, Y, and Z? What if there's bad weather? What if I have these physical limitations and that's different from what I'm thinking about doing on a physical activity basis? Or again, what about this busy schedule thing? And so I have a few ideas for you today that hopefully you can envision yourself trying out, and maybe even encouraging your family or loved ones to try with you. But first off, let's think about bad weather or outdoor restrictions. So maybe it's raining, maybe we're in high temperatures, it has been quite hot out, and a lot of times when we're able to exercise, that's in the thick of any kind of weather, which can be very off-putting. Maybe we don't want to be cold, maybe we don't want to be sweaty or hot. And so it's kind of rethinking how we can still make exercise or movement happen. So first idea I often love is a workout jar. So essentially, as you can see, taking popsicle sticks, writing different concepts on these popsicle sticks, putting them into a jar, and when you're experiencing weather that's less than ideal, turning to this and using that to inspire what your movement for the day will be. This is where we also are blessed with all of the technology out there. So investing in an app, something like FitOn, or even online video platforms. For example, Yoga with Adriene is an incredibly popular yoga resource on YouTube. And so that could be something, you don't have to go anywhere. It's right from home, and it's really not dependent on the weather or maybe outdoor restrictions. I also often say use the space that you have. So if it's not able for you to go outside, depending on that weather, use the space. Maybe that's just going to be some air squats, some lunges, and some push-ups. Maybe that's going to be a little bit of a dance party with your family. And so just different ways to kind of think about movement in conjunction with those key barriers that often are in place. Now, thinking about physical limitations, this can be a really big barrier for many of us, whether it's mobility, pain, discomfort, etc. I often say start small. Start with something that feels comfortable and listen to your body. You know your body better than I do or anyone else, so start small. For example, chair exercises can be a really great place to start. Really alleviating pressure on your joints, you're able to sit and you can start engaging in movement that way. Maybe the pain factor is really challenging, and so maybe exploring something like water aerobics or even walking in a pool where that increases the buoyancy to make it a little bit easier. That could also be something to consider. But oftentimes thinking outside the box and making your limitations seem less of a barrier can be incredibly helpful. And last but not least, this busy schedule piece. So this is probably 9 times out of 10 what I hear most from individuals is I don't have time, or that's just not a priority for me right now. So I like to think about making movement a little bit easier to digest. So rather than committing to 60 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever amount of time, thinking about movement snacks. So for example, maybe you often have a 15-minute break earlier in the day. That's a great opportunity to go for a walk. And maybe before you commute home for traffic, there's usually this 20-minute lull that you have between packing up and hitting the road. Maybe that's going to be a great opportunity for another movement snack of going for a walk, doing some air squats. Maybe you're able to hop on a bike that's local to you, etc. But just re-envisioning movement that doesn't have to be just one way, but breaking it up into bites to make it more digestible. I also often encourage tacking movement onto things you're constantly doing. Maybe a walking meeting, maybe if you're typically meeting up with friends or family for a coffee date or going out to dinner, maybe suggesting you do something more active to really support your goal of moving more, supporting your body and your mind, but also not foregoing that social time, right? And then additionally, families. We're often juggling so much if we're caring for families at home. And so doing things together like family dance parties, family walks after dinner, any way that you can stretch together to kind of do a bedtime routine, just finding little pockets to insert movement rather than saying, I can't do it because it's not this classic way of movement. It's truly rethinking the movement button. And additionally, this is where mindset truly makes the difference. So our minds are incredibly powerful. I often think that that is one of the biggest reasons we don't engage in movement, despite us physically being able to. And so I just have a couple different frameworks here to start thinking about. If you catch yourself thinking these thoughts, challenging that. Taking this as an opportunity to think about movement in a different way. So for example, I don't have time to work out. So rather than thinking about that, maybe flipping that to say, where can I add movement to my day? Maybe it's also, I'm not sure what to do. And that's where we flip it to what sounds like fun. So, really finding a way to drive that positivity and that optimism around movement and making it something you look forward to, you can easily do, rather than something we feel like we have to do or that should be painful or difficult. And really figuring out ways to enjoy celebrating ourselves, our bodies, and our minds. And last but not least, here you can see there's a really important one. The last sentiment here is, I missed a day. My progress was ruined. And so this is something I often run into with many people when it comes to movement, is that when we miss a day or a trip or travel comes up or something unexpected, it feels like the whole routine has shifted. And that's where that mindset easily flips to say, well, you already missed one day. Why don't you just continue that trend and not worry about it? But that's where I want you to say a little bit different of a story to yourself and say, I didn't have a chance to exercise today, but there's always tomorrow. And that's okay. I say no guilt, always kind of looking forward to the next day to seeing what you can do. Okay, and then how do you stick with it? So we've kind of had these ideas about how to get started, maybe viewing movement in a different way to become more routine, but sticking with it can be really hard, right? There's so many different reasons or situations that exercise and our health goals can fall off track per se. And so how do we find a way to do our best to remain consistent? And again, it's very similar themes as far as starting small and building gradually. So just like we're thinking about those walking on Tuesday and Thursday after dinner and incorporating that 2 times a week. 2 times a week feels doable. And eventually, as you do that for a couple weeks, you might feel more motivated and inspired to add that third day. Take that pressure off of yourself to do all or nothing. Oftentimes, that's very much how we approach activity because that's how it will count. And I'm here to remind you that it counts if you're showing up for yourself and you're consistently doing that. Now, to help with that, tracking your progress can be an incredibly helpful tool. So whether that's using a calendar and putting fun stickers on all the days that you've committed to doing some kind of movement, this is where different apps can also be helpful. For example, you see the Peloton app. If you've ever explored using this, this is something you can trial for free for about 2 weeks or a month, depends on what cycle they're in for advertising, and then end up purchasing the app or a membership on a monthly basis. But you see these fun little blue dots here, and this is what is keeping track of every time that you're showing up for yourself and doing some movement. And maybe this is just stretching. Maybe this is going to be yoga. Maybe it's only 5 minutes, but by looking at these blue dots and showing that consistency, that's helping to remotivate you to just keep going, right? Additionally, I think reducing friction is often very important when it comes to sticking with it. And for example, if we think about how to prepare for movement, maybe that means laying out our clothes and our shoes and our water bottle the night before. Maybe that means keeping extra shoes at our desk or in our car. Maybe that means putting them right by the door so when I get home, I'm ready and that has reminded me to go ahead and start moving. But the less friction you have around any goal, especially movement, the more likely you're going to do it. And that's where also an accountability partner can really come into play. So whether it's saying, I'm going to put my shoes by the door, and the moment I put my shoes on, I'm texting my friend or my gym buddy or my mom to say, hey, I've got my shoes on. I'm going for that walk I told you I was committing to 2 times a week. And that can be a great way to not only show up for yourself, but also have someone to connect with about this movement goal, especially if they're also trying to incorporate more movement as well. You'll also see this blue app here with a weight and a hand. This app is called My Workout Buddy, and this app is actually a place where you can keep the accountability within your friend group, your family, etc., and you can log your activity, and your friends and family can actually see that if you're using this app as well. You also can do this by joining a challenge with Fitbit or tracking your steps, and so that can just be another great accountability tool on top of all of these other ones that we've mentioned. Now, as we think about the sticking with it portion of movement, this is where we also need to be prepared for maybe some moments where we're not as consistent, right? So being flexible. Maybe you got a flat tire, someone called in sick, and so you have to stay late. Maybe someone's schedule changed and you had to go pick up your child unexpectedly. And so allowing yourself some grace and self-compassion, being flexible. And again, just because you missed today doesn't mean you can't restart tomorrow. There's nothing wrong with that. This is also where incorporating rest and recovery is really important. So if you're forcing yourself into exercising every day, that's where that burnout can become a little bit more prevalent. And that's where we don't forgive ourselves for missing that one day to recover. And that can really create an uncomfortable cycle when it comes to moving our bodies. And more importantly, I really just want you to make it fun and reward yourself. So after you've tracked maybe or we'll say 5 days of exercise or movement for yourself, maybe create a new playlist, treat yourself to a bath, maybe treat yourself to a new exercise shirt that you look forward to wearing. Maybe come up with these ways to reward yourself that feels good while keeping it fun. And again, maybe that while you're walking, as we've talked about for that goal 2 times a week, maybe that's where you're going to listen to the new album that Taylor Swift is going to drop, or maybe you're going to listen to your favorite podcast, and it really makes it an enjoyable moment and connects to pieces that are important to you, that downtime and that relaxation, but also that movement piece. And most importantly, when you're feeling stuck, maybe the movement piece isn't moving your blood sugars like you expected. Maybe you're not seeing as much muscle gain or fat loss or weight change or cardiovascular improvement. It's very easy in those moments to get super frustrated. And that's where we also start to maybe not be as consistent, but we give up on ourselves. And that's where I really want you to connect to that why. Why do I want to move? Why is movement important to me? And how is that maybe helping me reach my mental health, weight loss, and lifestyle goals? And so those are some really key factors when you're thinking about how do you stick with it. All right, and now that we've gone through all these different ways to think about movement and what is considered to count, I want you to really think about one simple way that you will start getting moving. So again, pull out those phones, get ready to scan that QR code, and think about what is one way. And this is actually going to prompt you to enter in an answer. So feel free to put in one word or maybe two short words in there, because it's going to be a bit of a word cloud. Or you can go ahead and use the link you see here to type that into your web browser as well. But what is a simple way that I will get moving? What is one simple way? We'll give us about 10 more seconds here. Okay, let's head to the answers. Okay, pickleball. Ooh, I love that. Walking, the morning time. Yep, maybe some habit stacking. The dogs. Yep. Going to the senior center potentially. Parking farther, dancing. I love all of these things. And if you notice, many of these are not structured or quote unquote exercise. We're not really seeing going to the gym or going to a workout class. We're really starting to think about ways we can just move our bodies more. And so that's what I really want you to take away from today. Outside of maybe that structured movement or that mind-body connection, how can we just move our bodies more and really use that to our benefit? I love all of these. This is great. And last but not least, I want us to really brainstorm what is your why for moving your body. And so you might see some images here on the screen. Maybe moving your body, that goal is really helping you support managing your blood sugar. Maybe it's allowing you to be more active with your family or your grandchildren. Maybe it's helping you reduce your medication use. Maybe it's making you feel more comfortable and confident in your body and yourself. So lots of different whys, but I'd love to hear all of your whys. So go ahead again, scan that QR code or use the link you see here and put that into your web browser. I'll give us all a few more minutes as we think about our whys for moving our bodies. Okay, 5 more seconds to enter in your whys. Okay, here we go. Okay, longevity. Ooh, I love how big that word is on the screen. That's fantastic. Weight, health, sleep, happier. Yep, joints, mental health, balance. Love it. Feeling more fit. I think some blood sugar in there. Yeah. So what I encourage you, if you offered something up today for what your why for movement is, write that down. Keep that close to you. Put it on a post-it note. Maybe put that next to your bedside table, on the mirror in your bathroom, maybe even on the steering wheel in your car. Put that somewhere where it reminds you of why you are trying to move your body more and what benefits you are reaping from that. And that's going to be the most important as far as getting started, finding joy in it, and sticking with your movement. And that brings us to the end of our mind body connection and using movement to feel more energized. Thank you all for being here. This was so great.
All right. Thank you for that very fun and engaging presentation, Gina. I don't know about anyone else, but I've been trying to get my family out for a walk around the block after dinner most nights, and I'm feeling inspired. I feel like you gave us some good practical tips for how to execute on that. We have a few remaining minutes for questions. I will go ahead and get started with a few questions, but please feel free to add additional ones into that chat box, and we will see how many we can get to. So let's see. The first question here, how does nutrition play a role in movement? Is there anything I need to eat before or after a workout to help with performance and recovery?
So this is a great question. So yes, movement and nutrition are definitely connected. There's many different ways to approach pre and post exercise fueling, depending on your goals, style of training. It really can run the gamut. But generally speaking, when we think about movement and what's going to support recovery in general, when we think about whether we've gone for a hike, we've lifted weights, we've gone to yoga, this is really exercising our muscles, and it's creating these little micro tears in our muscles. And so the best thing you can do to help repair and rebuild those micro tears is consuming adequate protein. So whether that's going to be your animal-based proteins, chicken, turkey, beef, fish, maybe utilizing a protein shake, leaning on your plant-based proteins or more of our dairy-based options like Greek yogurt, having enough protein to support recovery after you move your body is going to be really important. Now, not only will you need some protein to rebuild those muscles, but also incorporating some carbohydrates. And so carbohydrates are really important because that's what gives us energy. And that's that quick, easy, accessible fuel when we're moving our bodies. So for example, when you're having some chicken, maybe after you've exercised, pairing that with a sweet potato or pairing that with a little bit of brown rice or some fruit to get those natural sources of carbohydrates to help refuel and rebuild. So that's going to be really important. Now, generally speaking, when we think about before activity, this is where it can get a little bit gray. Generally speaking, I say if you are exercising first thing in the morning and you're getting up super early, typically for men, I say men tend to do a little bit better with fasted training, or what I mean by that is having nothing on board. Men's bodies tend to respond a little bit better hormonally to that. However, for women, if you're typically exercising first thing in the morning, I would say doing fasted training is not ideal. So for example, if you're going for a walk or a run, consuming at least a little bit of carbohydrates, we can get into the nitty gritty, but I want to keep this as applicable for most. So maybe, for example, grabbing a banana or a piece of toast for that source of carbohydrates. But if you're also going to incorporate some type of resistance training, maybe you're going to walk on the treadmill and lift some weights, or you're going to a workout class where you'll be doing some cardio movement and lifting weights or doing some body weight exercises, you do need a little bit of protein before. So I usually recommend about 15 grams of protein before you exercise. And I will say it's not going to make or break things if you don't eat before. before. It typically is ideal for women, doesn't seem to matter as much based on their research for men, but really after you fuel is going to be most important. And even more importantly, just making sure you've had an adequate amount of protein throughout the day, as well as carbohydrates when you're exercising routinely. And if you want more details, that would be great for you to meet with a registered dietitian like myself and Marion to talk more specifically about your individual needs.
Great, thank you. I know that's kind of a broad topic, but I think since we're dietitians, it's a great question. All right, and then I've heard that cardio exercise is more effective than strength training for losing weight. Is this true?
So this is a great question and something we're often asked so much about. And while cardiovascular activity is incredibly helpful for reducing fat loss when you're working towards the weight loss equation, it's not the end all be all. So I often find that, especially through research as well, a combination of cardiovascular activity and incorporating strength training is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. So as you are doing cardiovascular activity, that's going to help reduce your fat mass. And at the same time, you also are incorporating your strength training to help build up that muscle. Because when we're thinking about weight loss, we can't necessarily tell our bodies how to lose weight. So naturally, when you are losing weight, as well as using exercise to support that, you naturally will lose your fat mass, but you'll also lose a little bit of muscle mass. So that's why it's really important to do a good amount of cardiovascular activity to support the fat loss, but also incorporating that strength training to help minimize that muscle mass loss. As we heard earlier today, muscle is the most important metabolic organ that's really going to support your metabolism. So I would say it's not a this or that, it's really a this and that situation.
Great, thank you. All right, so I think we're gonna wrap up tonight's webinar. So thank you all for attending. A big thank you again to our speaker, Gina. The recording will be posted next week on the Stanford Health Library under the Lifestyle and Weight Management recorded lectures. And as a reminder, our webinars occur on the third Wednesday of every month from 5 to 5:45 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you next month on September 17th for our next webinar, Dine Out, Stay Smart, Tips for Dining Out. And I hope everybody has a great evening. Take care.